Great night.
Good night.
Welcome to the program. Police are still investigating the events that led to December's shootout in Queensland's Western Downs that left 6 people dead. The appalling crime has already prompted calls for a national firearm registry. As it stands, each state has its own register, frustrating police investigations that cross state borders. It's an issue that'll be on the table at National Cabinet on Friday, as Peter McCutcheon reports.
It's been more than 6 weeks since the tragic shootout that claimed 6 lives in this remote part of Queensland's Western Downs. The trauma runs deep.
It's really difficult. We've come through the Christmas period, but police are well and truly aware of the dangers which are out there, not only in Queensland, but right across the country.
And questions have been asked about whether police could or should have known more about the potential danger they faced on this Western Downs property.
Calls are growing louder for national firearm reform in the wake of the Queensland police shootings.
There are calls for Australia to take a national approach to gun laws.
We all need to be vigilant about how we can maintain our strong firearm safety framework and how we can improve it.
Gareth, Stacey and Nathaniel Train appeared to share extremist conspiracy theories which they posted online. They shot and killed police officers Matthew Arnold and Rachael McCrow, as well as neighbour Alan Dare, in response to what police say was a run-of-the-mill investigation into a missing persons report and a firearms offence.
It has been a day of devastation, a day of mourning for the whole QPS, the whole community and across our state and the country.
It's unclear exactly how much Queensland Police knew about the arsenal of 6 weapons and ammunition stored at the Weembilla property. At least 2 of the guns were unregistered, and the matter is now under police and coronial investigation.
What it has done is raised in the consciousness of the community that we are dealing with a situation where there are different systems for the management of firearms.
Nathaniel Train did hold a firearms licence in New South Wales and left 2 other rifles at the Queensland border when he abandoned his car there just over 12 months ago. In these cross-border cases, police say firearms searches can be clunky and cumbersome.
We have 8 jurisdictions across Australia which simply don't talk to each other.
Ian Levers is the head of the Queensland Police Union and the president of the Police Federation of Australia, representing members of all 8 police services.
I can't say what happened in Weembilla, it would have made a difference, but one of the murderers who executed my colleagues came from New South Wales. So we just need all this information available because people cross state borders. It's now 2023. And I think we need to pick up where John Howard left off.
John Howard was the Prime Minister when all the states agreed to a national gun registry in the wake of the 1996 Port Arthur massacre. The reason why it hasn't been achieved, gun control advocates argue, is mainly bureaucratic.
Undoubtedly it's a big task, and I think that's both in time, effort and inevitably money.
But this was all agreed to 27 years ago. Why has it taken so long?
Look, I can't understand that, and as what's happened in Queensland in December 2022, I've looked at an issue where I think there is failing, and I think we need to do it.
Fire!
Even gun clubs are on board.
One register would be ideal in terms of making sure that police can do their job and keep the public safe.
But gun clubs are wary of attempts to use the recent shooting tragedy to go a step further and introduce more firearm controls.
There would be real concern to have a knee-jerk reaction to automatically change firearm laws every time anything happened.
Others see the spotlight on gun laws as an opportunity for unfinished business. Citing a range of other post-Port Arthur reforms the states reaffirmed their commitment to as recently as 2017.
At times, the Australian policy settings have become a little bit complacent, looking back and patting ourselves on the shoulders.
None of the jurisdictions currently are totally compliant with the National Firearms Agreement. No jurisdictions manage the amount of ammunition that someone can buy, order or store. And there are a range of other technical aspects of legislation which are not consistent with the minimum standards that everyone agreed to.
There are also calls for better tracking of guns and gun owners. Although there was a sudden drop in the number of firearms in Australia immediately after the Port Arthur massacre, the trend has been going up over the past decade.
We have more firearms now than at Port Arthur. We have about half as many firearm owners who own probably between 4, 6 or 7 firearms each.
Overall, I think it's a good thing that there are fewer people have firearm licenses and are holding firearms, but the fact that some of them are holding a large number, I do have questions about why that's needed.
Drilling down on this information would assist not only policing, but also health and community service planning.
It's important for the community to know how many firearms there are in the state, to know where those firearms are, and not at an address level, of course, but to understand in the areas we live. That's an important bit of transparency for public safety.
Sporting shooters argue both ammunition controls and publishing too much information on where firearms are stored could have unintended consequences.
We don't believe that there's any need for postcodes or indicative maps to be a consideration in any national firearm registry because they're targeting by criminal networks of licensed firearms.
It's understood the focus of Friday's National Cabinet will be on the long overdue National Gun Registry, arguably the highest level discussion of firearms safety since Port Arthur.
If we were starting over today, we would certainly have a single source of truth when it comes to firearm owners, the number of firearms and where the firearms are.
A surge in crime and street violence in Alice Springs has frightened residents and shocked the country. It provoked an urgent visit from the Prime Minister and temporary restrictions on the sale of alcohol. The PM tasked a senior public servant from the Territory to recommend a more permanent answer to the alcohol and crime problems plaguing the town. Born and raised in Alice Springs, Pat Turner is one of Australia's leading Indigenous administrators and campaigners for reconciliation. She was part of the team tasked by the Morrison government to design a voice to Parliament, and she's also co-chair of the Joint Council on Closing the Gap. She joins me now from Canberra. Pat Turner, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Lovely to be here.
Now, you were a welfare officer in the 1970s in Alice Springs. What is your response to the violence that we're seeing now?
Well, I think it's a culmination of decades of neglect by all types of governments that we've had in power, both in the Northern Territory and at the Commonwealth level. And what we need to see now is not the knee-jerk reactions that we've seen to date. I mean, the appointment of Darrell, who's a very credible person and comes from a highly respected family, to produce a report on the alcohol restrictions in a few days is totally inadequate. I understand that that report has been handed over today, and I urge the Northern Territory and Commonwealth Government to release it immediately to the public, not to sit on it like they sat on the Little Children Are Sacred report all those years ago and led to the Commonwealth intervention. We're not interested in another intervention in the Northern Territory. What we're interested in is utilising the framework that we have in the National Agreement on Closing the Gap, whereby the Northern Territory Government, the Commonwealth Government and Aboriginal leaders in the Northern Territory sit down and work out a fair income strategy to address the lack of housing, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of service delivery in remote areas, and improve the educational outcomes for our children, institute early learning, early childhood learning and development programs, empower communities to have agency by reinstating Aboriginal community-controlled councils that operate in every community, and are able to then negotiate their priorities directly with government once this strategy is worked out, but it will require long-term joint investment by both governments and doing it seriously in a tripartite agreement with the Aboriginal